Danielle Colby stood next to him, not saying anything yet, but you could tell she felt a lot inside. Everyone had been talking for so long, stories, guesses, things that weren't true. People were confused. What really happened with Frank Fritz? Why did their friendship fall apart? Then Mike began to speak. His voice wasn't loud, but every word was clear. He talked about the mistakes, the things that went wrong, and the pain that none of them had shared before. Danielle nodded, and then she spoke too. Her words were soft but honest. They both said sorry, not just with words, but in a way that showed they meant it. For the first time, the truth was out. It wasn't about pointing fingers. It was about being real, about facing the past, even if it hurt. This wasn't just a simple story. It was about friendship, broken trust, and the hard road to making things right. The court appearance, what we know. In a shocking turn of events, Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby made a public appearance in court, something fans never expected to see. For years, American Pickers fans had been cheering for Mike, Frank, and Danielle. The trio seemed inseparable, always sharing laughs, adventures, and the occasional disagreement on screen. But behind closed doors, the bond was beginning to fracture. The court appearance wasn't about any legal battle between Mike and Danielle. It wasn't a lawsuit or any accusations between them. Instead, the courtroom drama was about something much more serious: Frank Fritz's guardianship and his care. Frank's health had deteriorated rapidly, especially after he suffered a stroke in 2022. He was no longer able to care for himself in the way he used to. His fans, friends, and loved ones were worried about his future. At the center of the conversation in the courtroom was Frank's well-being and who would make decisions for him moving forward. Mike and Danielle were there because they were named in Frank's guardianship case. It was an emotional moment, not for some lawsuit or fight, but because they were finally facing the reality of what had happened to their dear friend Frank. The tone of the courtroom was somber, filled with tension and remorse. Mike and Danielle both appeared emotional, clearly regretful for the way things had turned out. Their expressions were serious, their voices quiet. They spoke about the difficult years that had followed Frank's departure from American Pickers. Their apologies were heartfelt. It wasn't easy to listen to, but it was clear that both Mike and Danielle were in a place of deep reflection. In court, Mike admitted he had failed to reach out to Frank sooner. He said, "I should have called him. I should have checked on him more. I let my own life get in the way." Danielle echoed those sentiments, looking at the judge with a look of guilt and sadness. She said, "I'm sorry for not doing more, for not being there for both men in the way I should have been. I should have made more of an effort to keep the team together." You could feel the weight of their words. Both had spent years working side by side with Frank, and the bond they shared with him had become a part of who they were. But somehow, somewhere along the way, the distance grew. The judge in the room listened patiently, acknowledging the emotional nature of the situation, but also reminding them of the importance of doing what's best for Frank moving forward. There was no anger in the courtroom, just a sense of sadness and realization that things had gone off track. Mike and Danielle made it clear that they never intended to hurt Frank, and they admitted their own struggles played a part in the distance that had grown between them. Their explanation wasn't filled with excuses, but with an honest admission of failure. They recognized that things could have been handled better and that the challenges behind the scenes had taken a toll on everyone involved. Danielle Colby's statement: loyalty and regret. Danielle Colby, like Mike, had a lot to say during the court proceedings. As someone who had been there from the start of American Pickers, Danielle's loyalty to both Frank and Mike was clear. She always spoke highly of both men, and it was evident she had tried to be the peacemaker behind the scenes. But even she admitted that she hadn't done enough to keep the bond strong. In her statement, Danielle expressed a deep regret for not stepping in sooner to address the rift. She said, "I was caught in a place where I thought things would get better on their own. I didn't want to interfere, but I should have. I should have fought harder for both of them, for all of us." She acknowledged how much the entire situation had weighed on her. It wasn't just about the show or the work they did together. It was about friends who had once been like family. Fans have seen Danielle speak publicly about the fallout, and they know she's never been shy about her emotions. At one point, she even shared a video on social media where she was visibly emotional. "I miss Frank, and I miss the old days," she said, wiping away a tear. It wasn't just a post. It was a raw expression of how deeply this affected her. Danielle's tone was one of sincere regret as she reflected on the years they had lost and how, in hindsight, there were things she wished she could have done differently. It was clear from her statement that Danielle never stopped caring for Frank, and she wished more than anything that things could have been different. "I want to be there for him now," she said, "and I just hope it's not too late." In that moment, you could tell that Danielle's heart was still very much tied to the past, to the friendship she shared with Frank and Mike, and to the hope that one day they could heal together. Mike Wolfe's apology and reflection. Mike Wolfe, always known for his tough exterior, didn't hold back during his statement in court. In front of the judge and the public, he let down his guard and spoke from the heart. "I never meant to hurt Frank. I never wanted things to go this way," Mike said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I let fame get in the way of the most important thing in my life, my friendships. I thought I had all the time in the world to make things right, but I was wrong." Mike took responsibility for the fallout. He admitted that he had allowed the pressures of his success to take precedence over the friendships that had made American Pickers what it was. "I was busy. I was wrapped up in the show, in everything else. And I didn't take the time to reach out to Frank like I should have. I regret that. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." His words were heavy, but they were the words of someone who had learned a painful lesson. Mike's apology was more than just words. It was a reflection of the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. He understood that no amount of success or fame could replace the bond of a true friendship. It was clear that Mike had spent a lot of time thinking about what had gone wrong and how he could have been a better friend to Frank. "I should have called him sooner. I should have been there," he said with deep remorse in his voice. In that courtroom, it wasn't just about a legal matter. It was about the acknowledgement of past mistakes and a desire to heal the wounds that had been caused. Mike's words were sincere, and while they couldn't undo the past, they were a step toward making things right. The truth behind the scenes, what really happened. As Mike and Danielle spoke in court, they began to reveal what had truly happened behind the scenes. The story of Frank's departure from American Pickers wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. There were personal struggles, health issues, and miscommunications that had led to the rift. Mike explained that he and Frank had always had a strong friendship, but over time, things began to change. There were creative differences, and there were personal things going on. "Frank and I just weren't on the same page anymore," Mike said. He didn't go into specifics, but it was clear that both he and Frank were facing personal battles that affected their ability to work together. For Mike, the pressure of keeping the show going and dealing with the day-to-day demands of the job took a toll. Frank's absence, especially when he was battling health issues, only made things worse. Danielle shared her own perspective, talking about how she had tried to mediate but felt helpless at times. "We were all struggling in our own way," she said. "But we didn't communicate like we should have, and that was a big mistake." The tension between Mike and Frank had reached a point where even Danielle, the mediator, felt that she couldn't do enough to bridge the gap. "I should have done more," she admitted. It was heartbreaking to hear, but it was also a reminder of how often personal issues, whether health struggles, emotional pain, or misunderstandings, can drive a wedge between even the closest of friends. The fallout wasn't due to any one person's actions. It was the result of a combination of things that spiraled out of control. But in the courtroom, Mike and Danielle took responsibility for their part in it. What happened between Mike, Danielle, and Frank wasn't easy. But facing the truth never is. Their words in court gave a deeper look into a story that many thought they already knew. Now, with everything out in the open, there's a chance for healing, for understanding, and maybe even for something new to begin. If this story moved you or made you see things differently, don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe for more updates as this story continues to unfold. The days after the court hearing were filled with a strange quietness, a heavy pause that seemed to settle over everyone involved. Fans of American Pickers took to social media, expressing their shock, their sadness, and, for many, their support. They had followed Mike, Frank, and Danielle for years, feeling as if they were part of their journey, almost like friends themselves. To see it all laid out so openly, so rawly, was something no one had expected. It wasn't just about television anymore. It was about real people, real mistakes, and the raw consequences of drifting apart. Mike Wolfe stayed mostly silent publicly in the days that followed. Those close to him said he spent a lot of time reflecting, revisiting old memories, old road trips, old laughter shared in dusty barns and forgotten garages across America. He wasn't just grieving the friendship he had lost, he was grieving the time, the irreplaceable moments, that had slipped away. The realization that no amount of success could reclaim what had been lost hit him harder than any business failure ever could. Danielle Colby, on the other hand, chose to open up a little more. She shared a heartfelt post online a few days after the hearing. In it, she talked about forgiveness, how sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. "We all want to believe there's time," she wrote, her words resonating with thousands. "Time to fix things, time to make that call, time to say what needs to be said. But sometimes time runs out, or it changes everything before you even realize it." The reactions were mixed but overwhelmingly compassionate. People understood. People had their own regrets, their own friendships that had slipped away over misunderstandings or silence. Mike and Danielle, once seen as reality TV stars first and foremost, had suddenly become incredibly human in the eyes of many, flawed, wounded, and deeply sincere. Meanwhile, updates on Frank Fritz's condition continued to emerge slowly. His stroke had been severe, and the road to recovery was difficult. Guardianship proceedings meant that decisions about his care, his medical treatments, and even his living arrangements were now in the hands of the court and those trusted to act in his best interests. It was a heartbreaking turn for a man who once spent his days digging through junkyards and laughing over rusted treasures. Mike made it known that he wanted to be part of Frank's support system going forward. "Not out of guilt," he said, "but out of genuine care. Frank was my brother in all the ways that mattered," he told a close friend privately. "And you don't abandon family, not when they need you the most." Danielle echoed similar sentiments, telling the court and later the fans that she would do anything to help Frank heal, even if it meant simply sitting by his side and reminding him that he was not alone. Behind the scenes, the production team of American Pickers was grappling with the fallout too. The show had already undergone changes after Frank's departure, but now, with everything out in the open, the dynamic had shifted even more. There were whispers of a potential tribute episode, something to honor Frank's contributions, his spirit, and his undeniable role in making the show a success. Whether or not Frank would ever return to the screen was uncertain. His health would be the deciding factor, but his impact on the show's legacy was unquestionable. One of the more poignant moments came when Mike, sitting in his own private workshop surrounded by relics from decades of picking, recorded a short video message. It wasn't professionally shot or edited, it was just him, speaking directly from the heart. "We lose track," he said, his eyes glistening. "We think friendships are like old houses, always there, just waiting for us to come back and fix them up when we have time. But sometimes the roof caves in. Sometimes the walls crumble before we even realize what's happening. And then it's too late. Don't wait. Reach out. Tell the people you love that you love them. Before it's too late." The message went viral almost instantly. Fans, fellow collectors, even other television personalities shared it, relating to its honesty and urging their own followers to do the same. It sparked a movement online, people reconnecting with old friends, making amends, forgiving old wounds. In a way, the sadness surrounding Frank's condition and the collapse of the trio's friendship became a catalyst for something healing, something beautiful. Danielle, too, became more visible, attending several fan events and speaking about mental health, the importance of communication, and the lessons she'd learned the hard way. "Don't ever assume someone's okay just because they look strong," she said during one emotional panel. "Sometimes the ones who laugh the loudest are fighting battles you can't see." Privately, Mike and Danielle began working with Frank's family to set up a trust fund dedicated to his care, making sure that no matter what happened, Frank would have the best medical support and comfort possible. It wasn't about publicity. In fact, they tried to keep it as low-key as they could. It was simply about doing the right thing, something they both admitted they hadn't always done in the past. Reflecting on the early days of American Pickers, Mike admitted in an interview that the show's rise to fame had changed everything. "At first, it was just us, just doing what we loved, finding the hidden stories in forgotten places," he said. "But as the cameras rolled and the seasons stacked up, there was more pressure, more expectations, more noise. And somewhere along the way, we lost sight of what really mattered." Danielle agreed. "We became characters instead of friends sometimes," she said. "It wasn't intentional. But the world was watching, and that changes you, even when you don't want it to." As weeks turned into months, the wounds began to scab over, though the scars would likely remain. Mike visited Frank several times, often accompanied by Danielle. Sometimes Frank was responsive, sometimes he wasn't. But Mike never left without telling him, "I'm here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." There were talks of bringing Frank's old picks and treasures back into the spotlight, not for sale, but for a special exhibit. Something that would remind everyone of who he was, a passionate collector, a loyal friend, a fighter. Plans for the exhibit included photographs, personal notes, and even some of Frank's favorite finds from over the years. It was a way to honor his legacy, to keep his spirit alive even as he fought his own private battles. In those quiet moments sitting by Frank's bedside, Mike found himself thinking about all the adventures they'd had, the road trips that stretched for miles, the endless negotiations over rusty bikes and old gas station signs, the inside jokes that made the long hours feel like mere minutes. He realized that success wasn't about ratings or contracts or even fortune. It was about connection. About the people you took along for the ride. Danielle, ever the peacemaker, often held Frank's hand during visits, talking to him about old times, about how much he meant to her, about how much they all missed him. She promised him that no matter what happened, he wouldn't be forgotten, and that their story, the real story, would be told with love and honesty. Slowly, the fan base that had once divided over speculation and rumors began to unite in support of Frank. Messages of love and encouragement poured in from all corners of the world. People sent postcards, handmade gifts, letters filled with memories of their favorite episodes. In an unexpected way, Frank's struggle had brought the community closer than ever before. Mike often said that if there was one thing he wished fans would take away from everything that had happened, it was the importance of forgiveness. "We all mess up," he said. "We all let people down sometimes. But what matters is what we do after. How we show up. How we make it right." Danielle, too, echoed that sentiment in a moving video she posted months after the court hearing. Sitting quietly in a sunlit room filled with vintage finds, she looked into the camera and said, "It's never too late to say you're sorry. It's never too late to try and be better. Don't let pride or fear keep you from reaching out. Because tomorrow isn't promised to any of us." By the one-year anniversary of Frank's stroke, Mike, Danielle, and many of Frank's loved ones gathered privately for a small ceremony. They lit candles, shared stories, laughed, cried, and held on to the hope that healing, both for Frank and for themselves, was still possible. The story of Mike, Frank, and Danielle wasn't just a cautionary tale about fame, success, and the cost of ambition. It was a reminder that at the heart of every journey, every partnership, every great adventure, it's the people who matter most. Their story showed that even when things fall apart, there's still a chance for forgiveness, for healing, and for rebuilding what was lost. And as the sun set that evening, casting a golden glow over the gathering, it was clear that though the road ahead would be hard, it wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, built on truth, on regret, on hope, and on the unbreakable bonds of friendship that, even battered and bruised, refused to be forgotten.